Padres y hermanos, bendiciones de Panama. Fathers and brothers, blessings from Panama. I'm T.E. Tony Ellswick, and I want to give you an update on our transition, our life, and our work here in Panama City, Panama. We moved here about 2 months ago and have started initially working in a MTW church plant. Our transition's gone pretty smooth, but it hasn't been without its hiccups, particularly as our kids have missed home and their home church and have missed Nicaragua. Some of that has gotten better as we've gotten really more engaged in this church, and our two older daughters have helped us start a youth group there, and so that's been helpful. But please continue to pray for them and this transition. So we have been, as I mentioned, involved in a local church plant started by some other MTW missionaries here, and we're working with them. So I'm leading the youth ministry as well as their night of prayer. I'm on the preaching schedule, so I preached on Easter, and I'll be preaching again this coming Sunday. Also doing teaching Sunday school and involved with their session. So part of our work here is just digging into this church made up primarily of Venezuelan refugees. And actually this week, today, when you're watching this, we're going to have our second night of a park outreach, evangelism outreach that we're going to be having in this park, and we hope that you'd pray for that. Third, we're here and our primary work here is to be training pastors and church leaders, and so we are starting to lay the foundation for that to hopefully kick off some classes in the fall. And so we're working that in three ways. One, we're working through some connections with a historic church in Balboa, which is a suburb of Panama City, and we're hoping to start what would be kind of more like a traditional seminary. They're using Third Mill, about a 2-year track. And we're hoping to have a good partnership there with a church that's functionally Presbyterian. And I'll have to explain that to you some other time. But it is kind of an interesting relationship here in Panama. The second way that place that we're trying to work is in a community called San Antonio, which is part of the Wunan tribe. And it's a village that's not too far outside of Panama City, but they don't have a church. There's a lot of Christians there, but they don't have a church and they don't have a pastor. So we want to train up some of their leaders, some of their men to lead a congregation there. And third place we're working at is an area called La Reserva, which is part of the Darien Jungle, and it is a community from the Imbera tribe. And we're hoping to be able to go in there in a few weeks, kind of assess the situation, figure out how much of the gospel have they had. Do they have Bibles? Do they need Bibles in Spanish or in Imbera? Do they need audio Bibles and all that kind of stuff? And so we're really excited about that effort too, where we'll hopefully be able to train up some of the men to lead a congregation in their own village. And that both those villages would be kind of stepping stones for future work in a lot of these villages where they've received the gospel, but they don't have churches. So our work in Nicaragua is still going forward as well, and so you might remember that we brought 3 men under care of the Provisional Presbytery, and that work is still going forward. I'm meeting with them every other week to go over systematic theology by Burkhoff, and after that we're going to be going over to some church history and just working them to prepare them for ordination to be Presbyterian pastors in Nicaragua. And so that work is still going forward, and we're excited about that. And so just to recap our prayer requests, we ask that you'd pray 1 for our continued transition, 2 for the outreach here in the park for our local MTW church plant, 3 for the work in Balboa for that connection and starting a seminary there, 4 for the church, or for developing a church and church leaders in San Antonio and in La Reserva, and finally for the pastors who are working towards being pastors in Nicaragua. Hey, we thank you for all your prayer and your support as we work to bring more training, more pastors, and more churches to Panama and Nicaragua.